Hi everyone, welcome back. In this module, I am going to discuss about one of the most crucial factors of modern day networks, the security part. So let's start our module 16, which gives you a brief introduction about the network security fundamentals, the different types of hackers, and what we can do in order to mitigate these attacks. Network security is a broad term that covers a multitude of technologies, devices, and processes. Everybody comes across this term network security. Most of the people think that network security is one protocol or one practice or one particular technology. No, it's not. So to understand it in simpler terms, it involves usage of rules, practices, tools, and configurations designed to protect the integrity, confidentiality, and accessibility of computer networks and data. The reason why we stress about network security is simply put that any organization, in fact, each and every organization, irrespective of its size and type, must implement and integrate some degree of network security practices because it has to safeguard itself and its assets from this ever evolving cyber threat landscape. So in this module, we are going to cover these things. We are going to talk about security threats and vulnerabilities, network attacks, network attack mitigation, and finally, we will be talking about device security. So in order to discuss more, let us start with what do you mean by threat? What is this vulnerability? What role do they play in network security? Now, obviously, when an attack happens on a network, it leaves devastating results. So what do you mean by these devastating results? What happens if an attack happens and if an attack is successful? It may lead to a loss of time and money because of the damages done to the network, its assets, its reliability, all those things. Now, in order to understand better about this terminology, if you see that intruders usually gain access to a network through software vulnerabilities, hardware attacks, or through guessing someone's username and password. We will talk about each one, every one of these in detail in these later slides. These intruders who gain access by modifying or exploiting the software or software vulnerabilities are called as threat actors. So threat actors are these intruders. Their main objective is to enter or unauthorized entry into your information systems, whether they want to steal information or whether they want to modify information, whatever their objective might be. So the way through which, if they would like to do it, then it is called, they are called as threat actors. So these threat actors, if they get into the system, what happens is they have different ways and means of exploiting the system's issues. Now there are four types of threats that might arise if the attacker is successful in gaining access into the system. The first one is called as information threat. So what do you mean by this information threat? So information threat is if if somebody wants to steal your confidential information, what happens when a bank has got all the information set up on its systems, and if an intruder is able to get hold of that system, they might have all the vital information related to your credit cards. So what is going to happen? That comes under the threat as information theft. What about the second one? Data loss and manipulation. So if an attacker doesn't want to steal data, he simply wants to manipulate it, or he wants to steal it, or something is lost, some vital information is lost. What happened? Say if you have written an exam and unfortunately the university loses all the mark lists, who is going to answer? Do you trust the university? How much, what kind of trouble will the university be in? Third one is something called as identity theft, which has become a lot, which has become common these days, and it has become so ugly. The reason is identity theft. If somebody steals your information, your personal identification information, and they run scams on the credit cards or bank scams, which ultimately is going to lead to the banks coming after you, even though you claim that I'm not the person who done it. And obviously there are remarks that are kept on you. So this is called as identity theft. Last thing is disruption of service. So disruption of service comes into to explain it better. If I am an authorized user and if I want to use my banking, online banking, and if the attacker is successful to down the bank server, So I will be unable to access my account. This comes under the category of disruption of service. We'll talk about more of these four particular threats and what impact do they have in the later slides. So remember that these intruders who try to gain access into the system, unauthorized access, are called as threat actors. And once they gain access into the network, the kind of attacks that they can perform are generally categorized into these four types of threats, including the information theft, data loss and manipulation, identity theft, and finally the disruption of service. So there are we will discuss. I have downloaded something from the internet, so that gives you a little bit better idea about these types of threats. But believe me, this cybersecurity threat landscape is continuously evolving, and day to day we are coming across new terminology, new types of attacks that can happen. Now, what do you mean by a vulnerability? I said that a threat actor, an intruder will try to look for a vulnerability. What is this vulnerability? Vulnerability means weakness. Then what do you mean by weakness? The weakness is saying that whatever systems you take in, it might be software, hardware, devices, anything, obviously they will have vulnerabilities. No system is vulnerability free. So usually the administrators try to make sure that they patch up these vulnerabilities from time to time. But the attackers, if they are successful in identifying a vulnerability in your operating system, or in your device that you are using, or in some software that you have downloaded onto your device, on your mobile, on your laptop, because you run different types of software, you have different types of programs that are running on your system. So these vulnerabilities are present. Vulnerabilities are weaknesses. These weaknesses are generally exploited by the attackers. So what are the primary categories of vulnerabilities? Generally speaking, the vulnerabilities are categorized into three types. The first type of vulnerability is called as technological vulnerabilities. These technological vulnerabilities include the weaknesses in the TCP/IP protocols, your operating system weaknesses, and even sometimes your network equipment weaknesses. So the devices that you use. The second category is called as configuration vulnerabilities. Of course, you might think everything is fine. I have got the best thing. I have got the best operating system. Everything is updated. Then if you misconfigure something, or if you leave an user account without any password, or most of the people have a habit of leaving the default passwords. If you don't change the default password that comes with the device, obviously the attackers will have that information. So misconfigured internet services, default settings, or even if you did not configure the network equipment properly. We'll talk about this misconfigured network equipment. In our earlier videos, we used to work with configuration of a switch and router. We used to do security settings. We'll talk about those settings. If you don't do those settings properly, those kind of vulnerabilities, that means an attacker can gain access to your network device. And if he gains access to a router or a switch, he can have access to all the information that is flowing through the device. Those type of vulnerabilities, because of misconfiguration or leaving without any configurations, comes under configuration vulnerabilities. The third category of vulnerabilities is called as security policy vulnerabilities. This is when the organization does not have a clear security policy, it doesn't have a clear authentication policy, or there are no proper access controls involved there. If there is no proper flow of information, if there is no regulation of this particular information access, anything, and even software hardware installations which do not follow the policy or the regulations, all those comes under security policy vulnerabilities. And if an attack happens, usually each and every organization will have a disaster recovery plan. That means in case of an attack, what you do, what are the steps that need to be taken to minimize the impact. All those things, if they are non-existent, then those also provide vulnerable, those also create vulnerabilities. So these are called as security policy vulnerabilities. Generally, all three of these sources of vulnerabilities can leave a network or a device open to various attacks, including malicious code attacks and network attacks. So what are these two? What are these two? And before we study that, we also should talk about physical security. Obviously, wherever you work, even in your home, we have lockers, safes, where we have a now generally we use a key. Sometimes we use physical access cards, all those things. To talk about physical security, the first thing you should do is, if you're a student or if you're in a corporate company, you see the data centers which holds all the information. Generally, nobody else is allowed into those particular centers or critical infrastructure. Without proper access and without proper credentials, you will not be allowed to enter into the premises. Even in your colleges, if there is a server room, Usually no student is allowed. Only the network administrator or a handful of faculty members are allowed to go inside the server room, because all the marks, all the question papers, all your Moodle, everything that relates to your academic institution is stored there. So that is called as physical security. You should not allow anybody to come into it and do whatever they want. Generally, there are also threats that come from the physical aspect. So there are once again 4 classes of physical threats. The first one is hardware threat. This includes the physical damage. Whatever happens, the physical damage happens to your devices, including servers, routers, switches, cabling, and other workstations. Those come under hardware threats. Whereas the second one comes under environmental threats. This includes the temperature extremes. You see, most of these areas where the information is kept do have an air conditioning on at all times, 24/7, because we want to make sure the temperature is at the optimum level. And once again, humidity extremes, whatever, all those things comes under your environmental threats. The third one is called as electrical threats. This includes voltage spikes, sometimes the ups and downs in the voltages if you don't have the proper electrical wiring done, insufficient supply, brownouts, and unconditioned power noise, and complete power loss. If the UPS also fails, then that comes under your electrical threat. Last one, maintenance threat. Each and every one of these rooms must be properly maintained. So the electrical components, whether all the spare parts are kept ready or not, the cabling should be done properly. Even the labeling of the cabling should be done. So now, if these things are not done, all of those the vulnerabilities or the threat or the attacks that happen or the threats that happen comes under your physical security aspect. So a good plan for physical security must be created and implemented in order to make sure that this does not happen. It's actually pretty simple. You need to make sure that everything is ready, everything is properly maintained, and you designate the proper people who has knowledge on that only to have access to these particular systems. This comes under physical security. Now let's talk about network attacks. What do you mean by network attacks? Generally, if an attack is happening from outside your network, through the internet, through the network, then we term those attacks as network attacks. And if an attack is happening within the system or within the premises or within your network, we call them as internal threats or internal attacks. So network attacks, what do you see? First and foremost thing, every one of you must have received an email saying that you won a lottery, or please click this following link, it is very urgent, or click this link and get £1,000 free or ₹1,000 free. Such emails, all of those emails generally contain something called as malware. Malware is nothing but it is a short form for malicious software. It is these are codes or software which is specifically designed to damage, disrupt, steal, or inflict or illegitimate action on data, hosts, or networks. So anything, the primary objective of malware is to do bad. What do you mean by bad? It can do anything. It can switch off your system. It can modify the data you have. It can remove the data it have. It can even actually take your data and ask you for. It can lock your data up and even ask for ransom. There are different types of malware. Even though we are going to talk about only 3 variants here, the primary variants of malware, there are many names which comes under the single umbrella term malware. So the first thing that we talk is something called as viruses. You might ask me, sir, virus, we have antivirus and everything. Now, first you should understand what is a virus. A virus is, once again, it comes under the family of malware, which propagates by inserting a copy of itself into and becoming a part of another program. Generally, if a virus infects your system, it attaches itself onto the executable files, usually. So once the user clicks on those executable files, it keeps on replicating. It spreads from one computer to another, obviously through the exe files, and it keeps on infecting each and every system as it travels. Whereas the second variant of this malware, something called as worms. So these worms are pretty much similar to viruses, but the main difference between a virus and a worm is that worms are self-replicating. Virus requires human intervention. It requires a human to click on that executable files or to run some certain commands. Malware or the worms, it's not. So once a worm enters into the system, this worm can actually propagate itself to other systems very easily through the network. So please remember that worms do not require a host program or a human for propagation. Whereas the third variant is something called as a Trojan horse. You must come across the old book the Troy, where a Trojan horse is given as a gift, where they feel it is a gift, but it is filled with soldiers. Similarly, Trojan horse looks like it's a legitimate program, which you're downloading it so that it can help your system. But in fact, it has got some other malicious purpose. It is having a malicious intent. Such things are called as Trojan horses. They once again they self-replicate. These once again spread through user interactions, such like if you are opening an email attachment or if you are downloading a file from the internet. Sometimes when you download software from unknown third parties or other websites, grayish websites, those websites simply dump some code onto the system. So even without you knowing that, you might be infecting your own system through this malware. There are different types of malware. Other than these three, you should have come across adware, ransomware, scareware, rootkits, spyware. Lots of things are there. Keyloggers, bots. All these are harmful software. What they do or what their objective is to do some harm to your system. Their main objective is either to steal the information or to take hold of your system, to take control of your system, anything. So malware should be prevented. You should have some sort of plan to make sure that the malware does not enter into your system. The first and basic thing that we should do is use your common sense. Don't click on anything that you don't trust or that you don't know. Now, there are other types of attacks where in addition to these malware attacks, sometimes it is common for the networks to fall prey to different kinds of attacks. So usually these network attacks fall into three major categories. The first category is something called as reconnaissance attacks. So these in reconnaissance mode, what the attacker does is he actually tries to collect as much information about the system or for the intended victim. He has got a lot of information or a lot of utilities, lot of tools he can work with to do these reconnaissance attacks. After reconnaissance attacks, then comes the access attacks. So after reconnaissance, the attacker creates a particular threat or particular malware with a payload, and he he manipulates the victim to enable this particular malware to enter into the system. After it happens, then the next attack happens is something called as an access attack. So access attacks involve unauthorized manipulation of data, system access, or user privileges. If somebody else is entering into a system, or if somebody else is trying to access what you are looking at, or they're trying to modify the data. If you're having 1 lakh rupees in your bank account, and if somebody accesses the bank account and removes 2 zeros from it, do you accept? You should not. So those kind of attacks comes under access attacks, or even bumping up the privileges. If there is a employee who should not have access to the HR department, and if someone hacks into the system and gives him privilege to access the HR records, similarly, all those things comes under access attacks. And the third one, which is called as DOS attacks, are called as denial of service attacks. So this involves the disabling or corruption of networks, systems, or services. Usually what happens is, we talked about accessibility. We have something called as CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. The availability issue says that any system must be available for an authorized individual. These denial of service attacks are carried out with the objective of making sure that the user is unable to access a service or a device. So if I inundate a server, it crashes down, so that I will not be able to access my data. Or if I want some particular victim to not have network access, I can do something on the switch. I can send some code to the switch so that it shuts down. So those kind of attacks where an authorized user is unable to access the network services comes under denial of service attacks. So access attacks exploit the known vulnerabilities in authentication services or even application programs or even the protocol issues, and they try to gain entry into the web accounts or your databases and other sensitive information. Once again, these access attacks can be classified into 4 types. The first one is password attacks, where the user can try to guess your password by implementing a brute force or by a Trojan horse or even by packet sniffers. Packet sniffers work in such a way that they try to capture all the traffic that is passing through the network, and they will, based on that information, they can try to guess what your password might be. The second one is something called as trust exploitation. A threat actor can use unauthorized privileges to gain access to a system, possibly compromising the target. So you should, if you do not have an access to a system, and if you try to get access by using illegal ways, unauthorized way, then those kind of access attacks are coming under the trust exploitation. The third one is port redirection. Here what happens is, if you have gained access to a system which is considered as, or which is considered as a trusted system by others, you can carry an attack onto the other systems. Simply speaking, if a attacker is connected to a compromised host A, and B and C believe that A is a trusted system, so what can they do? What here the attacker does is, by using A, he can now access through telnet your B and C. That those type of attacks are called as port redirection attacks. The last one is a most common way. It is called as MITM attack or MIT attack, man in the middle attack. So here the attacker is positioned in between the two legitimate entries who are already communicating, or who was already established the connection. So he stays in between. He tries to read or modify the data that passes between the two parties. Generally, a passive capture of data happens, and once the communication has been finished between these two parties, the attacker, what he does is, he masquerades himself as the communicating party and sends this information. So to gain access or to communicate on his behalf, those attacks comes under your man in the middle attacks. So these are the 4 types of your access attacks. And as we have to discuss, the most important way is denial. The most important, or the common way of attacking the network infrastructure nowadays is through denial of service attacks. The reason why we say it has become most common is it is easy. Anybody who has basic knowledge of networks can do a denial of service attack, and it causes significant damage. Imagine something being broken down at peak hour. Usually when you want to book railway tickets or something, or airline tickets, and at peak hour, if your payment gateways fail, or even if your railway, the websites do not open, so those kind of things leave a significant damage on the economy of the company and everything. So these denial of service attacks should be stopped. It can take many forms. So the main goal here is to prevent authorized people from using a service by consuming system resources. The best way to defend against denial of service attacks is to make sure that your system is always updated. So your operating system, your security system, or your security software, everything is kept updated time to time. You know, when you keep on getting the updates from Windows or from Android, please update without any delay. As soon as you get an update from Windows, allow it, run it, install it, because you know these updates are being released in order to patch up these vulnerabilities, or even if they find a new way that an attack can happen, they release these updates so that those kind of attacks will not happen, will not be successful again. These are a major risks, as I told you, because they are relatively simple to conduct even by an unskilled threat actor, and they cause a significant damage. There is another variant of denial of service attacks, something called as distributed denial of service attack, DDoS. Here, usually what happens is the attacker infects hundreds and thousands of systems through some malware, by through a phishing attack, or different ways of doing it. And these infected systems are called as zombies. Now, once he selects the victim, he can make these zombies try to access that victim system at the same time. The system or the server or the victim server, which is not capable enough of handling that many requests, will simply crash down. So this is called as a distributed denial of service attack. And usually these zombies are also called as bots, 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 and such a network is called as botnet. We will study more about this in your cyber security courses. Botnets, zombies. So a network of these zombies which are infected is called as a botnet. And also the threat actor uses a command and control, CNC program, which actually allows him to have full control over this botnet, and it allows him to carry his actions through these zombies. So how do you know if your system is infected? Run the antivirus security. Please make sure that there is no malware on your system, and keep it do a regular scan, do a regular security scan from time to time. See if there are any unintended services that are running. In order to talk more about it, let us see. We have spoken now until we have discussed about the different types of network attacks, what are the different variants of it, all those things. Now, how do you stop these attacks? What can be done to mitigate these attacks? In this, the first line we call it as defense in depth approach. So the first thing you should do is you should first secure your devices. Most organizations employ a defense in depth approach. It is also called as a layered approach to security. So at each and every layer, if you see this diagram, you see layer 2 switches, layer 3 switches, you see an ASA firewall. ASA stands for Adaptive Security Appliance. ASA firewall, Cisco's ASA firewall. You can also see an ESA bar WSA appliance here. ESA stands for Email Security Appliance. WSA stands for Web Security Appliance. So all of these switches, you can see there is a small lock button over here. That means all of them are secure. So this is called as a defense in depth approach or layered security. What it does is it requires a combination of networking devices and services working in tandem. So these, how they are implemented, these are the list of those particular devices and services that we can implement in order to safeguard your network infrastructure. First one is VPN. Second one is ASA firewall. Third one is IPS, intrusion prevention systems. VPN stands for virtual private network, and IPS. So just spoke about ESA and WSA and a AAA server. I'll tell you more about these things in detail. So these are the different, it's a combination of devices and technologies and services coming together to protect your organization. So let us talk about why do you need to maintain a backup? We always come across the word data backups, right? Even as what we do is we need to, if we feel that it's an important document, we tend to keep it secure by having multiple copies of it. Okay. So similarly, what is happening here is what we are trying to do is we have to keep a data backup. They are very much essential to make sure that your data is not destroyed by an attack. So these data backups are usually stored off-site to protect the backup media if anything happens to the main facility. Take banks and banking sector, or even every corporate company, or most of the software companies, what they do is at the end of the day, they back up each and everything onto a server situated outside the country or somewhere else. Okay, so this particular table gives you the most important considerations that must be taken while handling data backups. So the first one is frequency. So how frequent are you to maintain these backups? So it is usually it should be on a regular basis. Systems such as banking systems does it every day towards the end, towards the evening. And software systems or software companies usually tend to back up their day's work, full day's work at the evening during the night. So it's up to you. And how much amount you need to back up? Do you want to back up the entire thing, or do you want to back up those files which are actually only modified, or leave the original files which are not modified as it is onto storage? So you should be able to validate the backups to ensure the integrity. If anything is damaged or if anybody has accessed it, it is the same thing or not. So, and also file restoration procedures should be validated. Third one is security. And where is this? Where are your data backups located? Who is accessing it? Who has the password for it? So there should be a written security policy on how to tackle the backups and how to implement the backup and how it should be secured. Last one is validation. All the backup should be safeguarded by strong passwords, and unless until an authorized user with the given password is present, this backup should not be restored. So this is regarding your backups. Backups play a very crucial role, whether you know it or not. All the backups do have, all the major systems do maintain backups of their data. Now, this you must have come across a lot many number of times. As I told you, each and every day new malware is coming into the market. So the best way to keep safe, usually the Microsoft does get all the malware things from these antivirus companies, and it tries to keep its Windows OS updated all the time. So whenever you see a Windows update that coming in, don't feel it as a bad thing or wastage of time, and please update it. Check for updates regularly, and the best option is just put automated updates all the time. So whenever Windows gets an update, let it push it onto your system and please install them. You have to make sure that all these, the main reason is unless until you upgrade, update and patch, your system is open for, or your system's vulnerabilities are open for exploitation. And then if attacker wants to attack you, he can find different ways and means of getting into your system. So the third one, which we discussed earlier, something called as AAA, authentication, authorization, and accounting. What it does is, it is the primary framework to set up control or to set up access control. If somebody wants to access a device or access a service, so what is the level of control that you should have? How do you provide the control of access to the systems? Usually there are 3 steps. The first one is authentication. That means who is permitted to access a network, authenticate. What actions they perform while accessing the network, authorize. So any action, say if I want to access some system, first it should whether first it should check whether I am allowed access to it or not. If I am allowed access to it, okay, fine. Then if I'm allowed to do that modification on the data or not, that is something called as authorization. And after that, whatever I did, the timestamp, the date, the action that I took should be accounted or should be logged. So authentication, authorization, and accounting. So these are the most important things. So once again, the concept of AAA is very much similar to usage of a credit card. So the credit card identifies who can use it, how much how much amount the user can spend, and also keeps a track of what amount and which items are being purchased by that particular credit card. So this is a simple framework in order to provide access control mechanisms. Now, you must have come across this term firewall. Firewall is once again a network security appliance. It usually people think that firewall is placed just to safeguard itself from outside threats, but some of the you can actually design and implement firewalls right now. Today's firewalls are much more advanced. These network firewalls actually reside between 2 or more networks, control the traffic between them, and it helps to prevent unauthorized access. We'll talk about the types of firewalls also and how it is being done and how the traffic is being screened. Generally, a firewall could allow outside users controlled access to specific devices. If your network administrator thinks that these some services on a server should be made accessible to users from the outside network, he creates something called as DMZ or demilitarized zones. So, and these servers are actually placed in the demilitarized zones. You can see in the third diagram over here. So this DMZ or the demilitarized zone enables a network administrator to apply specific policies for hosts connected to that network. So both the users who are present inside the network as well as users coming from the internet can access this DMZ. In simpler terms, a firewall works on security policies. If you write a policy and if you write some certain rules, based on those rules, your firewall either allows the traffic or denies the traffic. So based on that, and there are different types of firewalls available. Usually, as I said, to determine these firewalls work on what kind of information should be based on. The decision of either permitting or denying access to the network should be made on what type of information. So based on that, we have different types of firewalls possible here. One of it is packet filtering firewall, which prevents or allows access based on your IP and MAC addresses. Second one is application filtering, purely based on application. Applications, how do you identify them? As we discussed before, port numbers. And then the third one is URL filtering. So whether this website or specific URL is allowed to access or not, or whether the users are allowed to access this particular URL or not. If you mention some certain URLs which you want to block them, you can block them. And finally, the last one is called as SPI, stateful packet inspection. So these concepts include incoming packets must be legitimate responses to requests from internal host. If an internal host has asked a specific request for something, the incoming packet will be tested against that particular request, whether this is the legitimate response to that or not. If it is not, if there is no request from the internal, and if there is a packet which is incoming, which is termed to be unsolicited packets, they are blocked unless until you specifically permit them. So SPIs can actually have the capability to recognize and filter out specific type of attacks, such as denial of service attacks also. So these type of firewalls are called as stateful packet inspection, SPI firewalls. And everybody know what an endpoint for a network is. It is the device that you are using, your laptops, your mobile phones, the smartphones, tablets, any device, okay, which is we call them as network clients. So I can safeguard all my network, all my switches, all my routers, and all the other appliances, devices, etc. But what about the endpoints? Endpoints are actually being with the user itself. So how do you tell the user to safeguard his own device? It is a very big headache for the network administrators, because securing endpoints actually has to deal with the human nature. And if I am the network administrator, I'll tell you, okay, please set up your mobile phone in such a way that you have a very big password, you set up all these things. I don't know whether the user does have security awareness or not, and whether he follows my instructions or not, I'm unsure. So a company must have well documented policies to make sure that its users or any employees who are entering into the premises do adhere strictly to these particular security policies. Any devices that they carry, any devices that they bring in and plug into the network must be in compliance with the security policies. They must be checked and make sure, because if somebody gives you an infected pen drive, and if an employee unknowingly or willingly brings it into an organization and plugs it into the system, that itself is sufficient. If there is malware and it runs onto the entire network, it can either bring down the entire organization's infrastructure, or it can actually modify the data. So there are a lot of things, or it can actually provide a backdoor for the attacker to enter into the system. So first thing is, your employee should be trained on proper usage of network. So there should be some certain policies based according, which includes the usage of antivirus software and also constant checking of your devices. So these things have to be taken into consideration, and that's why endpoint security is also very important. Now, talking about endpoint security, we also should talk about device security. We have something called a Cisco Auto Secure feature. This Auto Secure feature does provide security for many of its devices. So what we should do? As I told you in the earlier part itself, these are some certain points which should be taken very seriously. Whenever you get a device, the default usernames and passwords should be changed. Even I bet that most of you who are watching this video will have some sort of default username and password, maybe for your internet access at college or corporate office, or maybe on your routers which you have purchased recently, or tabs, something like that. And access to the system resources should be strictly to the individuals that are authorized to the resources only. So implement proper access control mechanisms. Only individuals or only authorized individuals should have access to the systems, and any unnecessary services or applications should be stopped, and should be uninstalled. If you don't require it, and if it is running, if it's left open, it is going to be, or it is going to create a vulnerability. So any of those applications should be stopped. Devices shipped from the, as I told you, and if there is a device that you purchased maybe 6 months ago sitting in your hangar, and now you wanted to install it and configure it, the first thing you should do is check for any updates and make sure that you installed any updates or security patches for that particular device, and only then it should be installed onto the network. This is simple thing. These are all simple steps we follow. That is a first level of defense. And then let us talk about passwords. Everybody knows what a password is, and everybody has got many passwords. So let us talk about what are the best guidelines or standard guidelines for setting up of passwords. If you talk about these passwords, if you see, password length of at least 8 characters usually should be more than 10. Make it complex. You just don't simply put welcome, hello, how are you, those kind of things. You include a mix of uppercase, lowercase letters, numbers, symbols, and spaces. Nowadays, most of the banks or even some of the websites does not allow passwords without a combination of these things. They will make sure that you have at least 8 characters, and it should always be a combination of uppercase, lowercase, special characters, symbols, and numbers. And also common dictionary words you should never be used. And also, because of the social media, everybody now knows what your birthday is, or other personal information about you. So what can be done is, if it is better if you avoid passwords on these things, on your family names, on your parents name, on your vehicle numbers, or on your I'll just like your ID numbers or something like that. So easily identifiable pieces of information about you should not be used in your password. You can use something else. And you can, it's one simple logical thing is, a shortcut is, you can misspell a password, because it will be very difficult for an attacker to do that. You can see Smith, SMYTH, or S can be replaced with 5MYTH, Y is capital. Security can be written like that. So it becomes really difficult for the attacker to guess what the password is. If you can do that, you can deliberately misspell that and keep on changing your passwords. Now, most of the systems, most of the uh, sensitive information systems that we have today does not allow a user to keep his password for more than 2 months or even for 1 month. They keep on saying they will not allow access unless until the user changes his or her password after 1 month. So make sure that the passwords are often changed. Never write a password and leave it somewhere else. Never write a password. Forget about it. Don't leaving it. Never write anything. Always memorize it. Always memorize it. Make it a habit of memorizing it. And another way, another approach which is now being used is something called as using a passphrase rather than a password. Use a space bar and type in a small line, so a little small sentence, which it really makes the attacker work very hard to, if he wants to break the password. A password is very much difficult, and the other side of it is a passphrase is easy to remember than a simple password. You can, like, I love my cats, and you can actually change those symbols just like I shown you. Oh, the O in love can be changed to 0. E can be changed to something else. Like that, you can do a lot of things. So make sure that the passwords that you're setting are met with the guidelines, and they should be complex. They should never be simple. They should never be based on your name or your parents' name, like those kind of things. Even now the system does not allow you to create such passwords. So additional password security, we did this in our earlier things. So service password encryption is the command that we used to do when we want to safeguard our switches and routers. There are some additional passwords here. There are some additional things. So you can actually set up a security password minimum length 8. That means unless until it is more than 8 characters, it won't allow you to set that password. And you can also type in this command, login block for 120. So attempts 3 within 60. That means if an attacker is trying to hack your password, and if there are 3 unsuccessful attempts which are made within 60 seconds, your login will be blocked for 120 seconds. You can actually write your own code there. I'll explain this. So this command, what it does is login block for 120 attempts. What it does is it will block your login for 120 seconds if there are 3 unsuccessful attempts made within 60 seconds. Similarly, execute timeout 5:30. This 5 is in minutes and this 30 is in seconds. So what it ultimately means is, if your system has been idle for, let me say 5 means 300 seconds and plus 30. If your system is idle for 330 seconds, timeout. So that means kick it out. Once again, you have to log in. You can set your own timers over there. So these are all simple codes that can be written to make sure that your systems are safeguarded. You're not just keeping online. And another thing is transport input SSH. This will allow only SSH connection. It will not allow a telnet connection, because telnet is unsecure. There is no encryption done. Whereas SSH, it is secured, because any traffic that is sent using SSH is encrypted. It makes it hardens the job for an attacker. So these are some of the other security commands that we can use. There are many security commands that we can use to safeguard your devices. We will be studying more about these commands and implementing them in CCNA 2. So enable SSH. This is also, we will talk about this procedure in the packet tracer video. And this is actually the first module of your CCNA 2, where we try to implement SSH. These are the 6 steps that we need to do. First thing is, you need to configure the host name. It should be unique. Then we should also configure an IP domain name, and then we have to give a command to generate the key strength. Usually we give it 1024. The command that we use it is crypto key generate RSA, generate keys modulus, and we give it 1024. And you should create a local database entry, and we should also give the command login local, because any entry should be matched with the database entry. And if an unauthorized user whose name is not within that particular database will not be allowed to have access. And then we should also enable the VTY inbound SSH session zone. That means I just told you transport input SSH command, which will allow only SSH access. If you try to access through telnet, it won't allow you to enter into it. So you can just check out the video where we give a live demonstration, and then you can see here disable unused services. In order to find out if which ports are open or which ports are closed, you can just type in show IP ports all, and any unused services or any unwanted services, we should always disable them first. You need to simply disable. And if you don't disable them, if you are running and if you are least bothered about them, maybe the attacker can find some kind of vulnerability in them, and he can try exploiting these services and then gain access into the system. So another thing which you should keep to make your device secure is disable any unused services on the device. So we have come to the end of this particular module. So these are all the things that we discussed in this particular module. As I told you, 4 types of threats are there: information theft, data loss and manipulation, identity theft, and disruption of service. Three types of vulnerabilities are there: technological, configuration, and security policies. 4 classes of physical threats are hardware, environmental, electrical, and maintenance. Malware is always bad. It stands for malicious software. The network attacks, generally we can categorize into 3 ways: reconnaissance attacks, access attacks, and denial of service attacks. And you should always employ a defense in depth approach or a layered approach to security. That means you can just simply buy one device, put it onto the network and say, I'm done. No, the devices and services should work in tandem to secure your organization. There are many multiple devices that are available, or there are different services. As I told you, virtual private network, ASA firewall, IPS intrusion prevention systems, AAA servers, ESA and WSA appliances. Okay, and backups play a very crucial role. This backup should always be at a remote site, and they should always be validated. Once again, in order to safeguard against worm attacks or malware attacks, your operating systems and your systems should always be updated and patched. Any updates that are arriving should be installed. AAA is a way to control, authenticate, authorize, and accounting. It's a way to provide access control. You have to make sure that the users are having only authorized access, or authorized user should be accessing the system, nobody else. Network firewalls, they stay between 2 or more networks. They can actually safeguard an internal network from outside threats. And endpoint devices is very crucial. The primary thing about endpoint security is your users must be made aware. They must have awareness on security. And finally, so Cisco routers, as I told you, Cisco auto secure feature, you must have strong passwords, better to use a passphrase, and you should have proper configuration commands done on your switches and routers to make sure that they don't fall prey to an attacker. Make sure, and also use SSH. You should configure SSH on the devices and make sure that the only SSH access is allowed, and you should always disable any unused services. One final point before I close is cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility. It's not one individual or one team of individuals that should take care. Each and every person is responsible for safeguarding the data. Security policies usually involve each and every person. Okay, so stay safe, stay secure, and have a happy life. Thank you very much, guys. I'll see you in the next video. Next module, we'll talk about it. Thank you.